Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Montreal Alouettes hand the Toronto Argonauts their first loss of the season, 30-20, the final score. And this one not really in doubt throughout that whole second half. We'll have a recap and reaction as our post-game reaction podcast gets underway. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing, which is the perfect place to go pre-game, especially as the weather gets nice. They've got a great patio setup, all sorts of beers to choose from, some seasonal varieties like Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue after the Toronto Argonauts. And of course, they've got a lot of seasonal varieties, but also some regulars that you can get and some that you can find at the LCBO as well. So make sure you check out Something in the Water Brewing the next time you're in Liberty Village. Maybe you want to catch the Argos practice and wander down there after to grab a pint. It's the perfect place to do it. JB, I'm going to hand it over to you first for some initial thoughts on this. 30-20, maybe a little bit flattering final score in the end, thanks to that Brian Scott late touchdown. It was close at the half, though, and the Alouettes just pulled away in the second half. Toronto couldn't find the end zone. What'd you make of this game?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a very good team versus a good team. I think that Toronto held their own for a half, but Montreal is just executing at such an elite level right now. You look at their win streak. I mean, they're executing so well, and Toronto just has too many new parts to be. I think to be able to compete at that level yet. I think this is, to be honest, is a perfect early season game where you play a team, whether it be Winnipeg recently or Calgary back in the day, but like you play a team that is just very good in all three phases and are executing at a very high level. And you see where the bar is, because, Montreal was the better team all game.
Yeah, and we knew this was going to be a tough game. I wasn't really surprised by the end result. I was surprised that the Argos seemed to not be able to do much offensively at all. I expected the defense to play well, and I know Montreal's got a good defense too. I was a little shocked by how little the Argos could generate offensively. It just seemed like they were always in second short situations that they couldn't convert, and then punting the ball back. We talked about the fact leading up to this that Toronto was going to have to make the most of their field position, and that was not something that went their way. Montreal had the better field position from start to finish in this game, and yeah, it was a problem for the Argos in the end. What'd you make of Cam Duke's play? He was 22 of 32 for 199 yards, threw his first interception. I did not think this looked like the Cameron Dukes that we saw over the first 2 weeks. Was there something Montreal was doing that was frustrating him? How did you read his game?
Well, I think there was definitely much more pressure on him. I think that he hadn't had that much pressure on him. And so he definitely was speeding up his action. He wasn't stepping into his throws, and his throws were getting away from him because he was looking to get rid of it immediately instead of stepping into the throw. So I think that affected him. In the red zone, they clearly were confusing him. A combination of not having enough time, and his first read just was not there. Montreal did a very good job of making him look very average in the red zone, which has been the difference for Toronto. That Toronto has not been like overly impressive offensively, except they've been very efficient in the red zone and scoring touchdowns. And tonight, they went for field goals instead of touchdowns, which was our worry preseason, and that's just not enough to get the job done.
Yeah, these two teams are very similar, Montreal and Toronto. And Cody Fajardo, I think, has a lot of similarities with Cameron Dukes. They're very similar quarterbacks. Fajardo is playing Fajardo football at a higher level than Cameron Dukes was, though. You notice that, like, Fajardo, really, it was the first 3 quarters, he did not take a single shot downfield. He was just happy to take what Toronto was giving him. And
Yeah.
Toronto was playing that umbrella over top. And he's like, I'll just complete 5-yard passes all day long. And they did that.
No.
And some of them turned into touchdowns.
It was really frustrating to me because I liked it. I was like, yes, that is the bend but don't break. That's what we wanted. It was just really frustrating to watch him never make a bad pass and to watch him be able to nickel and dime. But honestly, I thought the first 3 quarters, the bend but don't break worked. I thought defensively, and the issues were really with Toronto scoring as opposed, they took away Montreal's deep pass. After the 1 touchdown, I thought they did a good job of shutting down Philpott. They kept the run in control. Like, honestly, they checked most of the boxes. The punt return coverage was not what we hoped it would be. But I thought game plan wise, they can't be that upset. They just simply offensively were not able to convert in the red zone.
There were 3 touchdowns scored by the Alouettes. One of them I'm just going to throw away in terms of blaming the defense because that was after the first interception of the season thrown by Cameron Dukes. He threw a pick. It was deep in Toronto territory. Montreal turned that into a touchdown. But those other 2, it could have gone very differently. On the one, it looked like Leonard Johnson slipped and fell. He had Philpott in coverage. He slipped and fell down. Philpott looked like he was about 2 yards offside on that play. It wasn't called. Johnson slips and falls. Philpott's able to get into the end zone on that. So that's 1 touchdown. The other one came on a 3rd and 1 situation right after Caleb Evans had been stood up and stuffed the first time he was out there for a 3rd and short quarterback sneak. This time they go over the top to Speaker. And that one, I can't blame Johnson at all. When you're one-on-one like that, and it's in the middle of the field too. He wasn't out wide. He was basically 5 yards out from where the line was. And it's impossible one-on-one when you've got the entire field. He could have run a 5-yard out. He could have run a post, a corner, a hitch, a go. And he ends up running a skinny post. I can't blame Johnson for that. It was an easy touchdown. Really what you need is pressure. You can't let Caleb Evans get that ball off without being disturbed. And the line just didn't get there in time. They were all diving underneath, trying to stop that sneak. It was a brilliant play call from Montreal. But let's talk about those 2 scoring drives and how that really was the difference in that game. One was aided by penalties where Cody Fajardo was knocked out of the game with an injury. I didn't see what it was. He goes down. Caleb Evans comes in. He's got a 2nd and long and a face mask penalty is called. And they are given a first down, 15 yards. And then just a few plays later, there's another penalty. I can't remember what the second one was. Was it a late hit on the quarterback, I think? And yet again, the drive gets extended. And the result of the play is yet another score. That should have been a 2 and out. Defense is out. Offense is back on the field, and it's not a score. And then the other one is the onside punt, which was inexcusable after seeing Montreal execute that twice last year. You're in a 2nd and 20. Mike Hogan and I were up in the booth saying, well, obviously they're going to be looking to Jeshuan Antwi for the onside punt. And we couldn't believe it. We're watching on the field as nobody was close to Antwi. He comes in, executes a block, and then slips out like a screen, catches the pass, punts it for 1 yard, dives on it, and they've got a new set of downs. We were beside ourselves in the booth that Toronto wasn't uptight, at least on him. If you're going to give everyone else space, fine. But yeah, that was sort of the difference in this game, the way I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I think largely I was happy with how they played Montreal, and I think largely they played them very successfully. They had the bust on that stupid punt rule, and they had the bust on the short yardage where the cornerbacks forgot that their guys were receivers. I think that I chalk that up to a defense that is, still very inexperienced in the secondary.
The good thing I would take away, though, is that we didn't see the problems from the cornerback spot that we saw last week. Last week, Benji Franklin and Leonard Johnson both got picked on pretty heavily.
look, if Toronto scores touchdowns instead of field goals, it's a totally different game.
Right.
I mean, that's all it was. I mean, it just basically boiled down to that is, they had to take field goals, and you just were not going to beat Montreal kicking a bunch of field goals.
And this was the first time that we really saw the difference with Chad Kelly not being out there, because I think the offense probably looks very different in the second half with Chad Kelly on the field, who is not really afraid to take shots downfield. Dukes seemed very reluctant. That's just not his game. And this is not a Toronto team right now with Cam Dukes at the helm that you want to be behind by a couple of scores. It was fine when you're down one score, but I don't see this as the kind of offense, the way they're structured. Montreal's like this too. These are just not offenses where you want to be trying to digging out of a big hole like that. And so, yeah, I do think Chad Kelly's arm strength and ability to really push that ball downfield aggressively was missed today.
Yeah, like you look at Montreal, they won this game because of execution and attention to detail. And Toronto played well, but they did not have the same level of attention to detail. They got caught, on 2 trick plays. And that was really the difference between the two.
The running game went well for Toronto, because I think if you had told me pregame, the Argos are going to have over 100 yards rushing, they're going to hold Montreal's running backs to a total of 11 yards. If you told me that pregame, I'd say, well, the Argos win this game. And it's not like Dukes' stats are terrible. You'd like to see the yardage number higher. He's 22 of 32 for 199. And he's, of course, got no touchdowns, the one interception that was big. But it's not like those are terrible offensive numbers, but it's just it's the lack of touchdowns. No touchdowns. You can't win a game when the only touchdown you score is with a minute left. And so that was the difference.
I think, the takeaway is obviously Toronto had way too many penalties. Toronto got caught on a couple of trick plays, and, that Toronto's red zone, completion rate, which was a bit preposterous, came back to earth. And, and now they're going to have to go back to work. I think the score, even with it was a little misleading. I really do think the game was pretty close for 3 quarters. I just think Toronto is not competing at that level yet, but that's okay. I mean, I think you look forward. They weren't pushed around. They didn't, it wasn't like a game where they came in and they were out schemed or out coached or out athleted, which sometimes you see. That was not the case here. I think the margin of victory is actually pretty small when you take a look at this game. I think when the coaches look at this game, it's going to be that old coaches line about 5 plays made the difference. And, I think when the coaches look at this tape, they're going to be pretty happy about their game plan, because I think it worked largely.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's just like you said, those little bits of missed execution, and easy to pick out 5 plays here that could have been the difference. And if you break down some of the things, and actually before I even break down some of those things, there's nothing wrong with losing to Montreal in this case. You've got another game against Montreal coming up, and look at Montreal last season. Like, Montreal lost all 3 matchups with the Argonauts last year and won the one that mattered. They were there in the East Final. They had to go on the road to do it because of those earlier losses, but they had the last laugh. And Montreal wasn't as good a team as Toronto for almost all of last season, but they picked it up and found a way to work together at the end of the year. This Toronto team is not as good as Montreal right now. Yeah, they can play with them, they can win, but they're not currently playing at Montreal's level. That's okay. There's a lot of time. We're in June. There's a lot of time to go before the end of the season. I agree.
I mean, I've seen games, you see games where you watch 2 teams and you're like, wow, that team is way better than my team. They're just faster, stronger. You just know that you're playing on different levels, and that's not the case. Montreal, we talked pregame, they're very difficult to stop because they execute at such a high level, and they demand that you play smart, mistake-free football for 4 quarters, and that really is the demand that they put on you. And so that's the mental demand that the Argos will need to ramp up in the rematch.
And if you're looking for evidence of Toronto belonging on the field with Montreal, you just have to go watch two of Montreal's three other games. You watch their opener against Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I know they haven't won a game yet, but that's, you're talking about Zach Collaros. You're talking about when they still had healthy receivers and a healthy running back. And Montreal just blew the doors off them. You look last week, the Ottawa Red Blacks in Montreal, that wasn't a game. That wasn't even close. It was over at the end of the first quarter. That's not what happened to Toronto. They belong on the same field as Montreal. They're just not quite there yet. Like you said, the level of execution. If we look at some of the reasons this went south, you mentioned penalties. Montreal, 5 penalties for 65 yards. Toronto, 11 penalties for 120, and they came at inopportune times. That's a huge difference there. The lack of touchdown passes for Cody Fajardo, for Cameron Dukes, that's a big difference maker. And not finding a way to take advantage of turnovers, not find a way to take advantage and make a play. They had that stop, that turnover on downs early in the game. It turns into a field goal. They were already in field goal range. The offense has got to turn that into a touchdown. They picked Cody Fajardo off in the end zone, and they can't find a way to do anything with that. They just punt the ball right back again. And so they weren't able to capitalize on the opportunities they were given. Montreal was the opposite. They were immediately able to capitalize on Toronto's mistakes. And really that's it. Otherwise, I thought, the defense played some pretty good football. The offense were okay. They needed a little bit more for the passing game, but again, that will come. We knew there would be, we expected most games actually early on. These first 9 games, we expected a lot of them to look like this tonight. It's pretty relieving that it's only coming against Montreal.
I mean, our most optimistic hope was really like 5-4.
Yeah.
In terms of these first 9 games, I think this loss will be a good one. Like, not, if there is such a thing, because, you can look at, okay, like the attention to detail, the being aware of, look, we know that they run this, we know that they run this. Like they, like making sure that, your receiver is an eligible receiver. And if they're going to run that kind of, spike play or that stack play where the first receiver is going to jam a guy, that's just technique and working on it, which is very different than American football, that kind of spike technique that they ran on the Philpott touchdown.
Yeah, it's tough. And if you're a DB that's not used to seeing that, it's really tough to adjust to. And that's, I think, where Johnson lost his footing. And what JB means by the spike technique is where guys sort of switch at the last minute because of the waggle, where you've got one guy on the line of scrimmage. He may start out over here on the left, but by the time he snaps the ball, he's actually on the right. And so coverage responsibility changes there. You need to be communicating between the DBs. They need to know, okay, we've got a quick banjo call here. I'm going to take the guy on the outside, whoever that is at the end of this. You're going to take the guy on the inside. That way we don't have to cross, and you don't end up with one guy having to cross all the way over and not be able to stay with a guy. So plays like that, again, are new corners, new DBs. They're going to get used to that. One thing that I think is very concerning for the Argos going forward, there was one, a tough physical game, a lot of guys banged up, but Quincy Moget really had a tough time out there tonight, and he left on crutches. Watching him make his way across the field, he couldn't put any weight on his one leg. He's getting across in crutches. He took 2 really hard hits, both from his own teammates, some friendly fire from Jonathan Jones, both on special teams. He was out there as the gunner on punt coverage, ran into Jones. He ran into Jones once on punt coverage, ran into someone else on another one, and then ran into Jones again on defense. And that last one was too much for him. He ended up having to take a knee, having to be helped off the field. And to see him leaving the field in crutches, that's a tough spot because there aren't a lot of Sam linebackers on this football team. They're hard to find league-wide. They ended up having Jonathan Edwards step in. Now, he ended up getting injured too. Metier had to move down there. Tyshawn Blackburn ended up at safety. This defensive secondary, they are going to need to sign a couple players in a hurry. If Moget is out for some time, even if he's not, even if it's just a short-term injury, they're going to need some support. You're going to have to bring some guys in. You're going to have to find some DBs. And there are a couple guys out there that you could look to bring in just even if it's a short period relief. They just don't have guys on this roster right now who can step in and play defensive back.
No, and that definitely contributed to the fall off in play that we saw in the fourth quarter. Is you just had guys playing out of position and obviously just not going to play as well. I thought one positive thing to take away too was that how hard they played when the game was clearly, out of reach. That goal line stand was fantastic, and almost, they were almost able to pull it off. And then the touchdown to Poke, that level of fight has to be encouraging for the coaching staff, that the things didn't just fall apart when Montreal was kind of handing it to them in the fourth quarter.
And again, positive takeaways. Nice to see Polk at the end there. I know it was in garbage times at the end of the game, but Brian Scott getting some snaps, and the way he went in the game last year, his only time last year against Winnipeg, it was really tough. He did not have a good outing. He did not look good. I felt good for him to be able to get out there, go 5 for 5 for 79 yards and a touchdown. Yes, it's against prevent defense, but it was a nice moment for both he
Right.
and Mackay
Still
Polk to get in.
professional touchdown in a regular season game.
Yeah, and it was a great ball too, because Polk had inside position, but there was danger to the outside, and Brian Scott, even though it was on a seam route, knew there was no one in the middle, so he led him to the inside. Mackay Polk makes a nice adjustment, caught the ball, and then had the wherewithal to roll into the end zone, because he realized, I haven't been touched yet. This is not college. I can roll into the end zone here, and he did just that before the DB got there. So that was a really nice moment. It's meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but you're getting two young guys, more experience and some more confidence going forward. That's never a bad thing. Before we sign off here, JB, in terms of going forward, I think there may be a need to find some more answers deeper downfield for this Argonauts team, because it occurred to me especially as they were trailing there, they just didn't really have any plays that threatened the deep areas of the field. Is it a personnel issue? Do you need to find a way to generate some more speed and get some speed, inject some more speed into the lineup? I know they tried to, they ended up trying to throw Jerry and Grant out there as a receiver, seeing if they could have something happen. But it felt like maybe in the play designs, there's something missing, that they're just not able to threaten deep downfield, and everything was short today.
Yeah, I mean, they do lack speed. They have really for the last couple of years. They don't have somebody on the team that you would consider, elite fast, elite wide receiver fast. And that can be a problem, with not being able to back those safeties off. It can make for really hard sledding. Like on that interception, there were like 5 Montreal players around the receiver. That there shouldn't be any play that leaves 5 defenders defending the player. Now, the interception thankfully went over top of all of them to the 6th defender. But again, that's a problem in spacing, right? That's a team that is crushing you from 20 yards in. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can add somebody now. I think it's just Kelly's arm is what allowed the team to take the top off, and I just think they're going to have to do the best that they can. And we keep relying on the running game, and it wasn't the best game for the offensive line, and they'll study that, and they're a little banged up as well.
Yeah, no, they are for sure. And, guys toughing it out. So many Argos are definitely going to be feeling this. And it's a short week coming up. This is going to be a test to see how well this team rebounds. They've got a Thursday game. At least it's Friday. It's not Saturday or Sunday. And you're going to a Thursday game like we saw the Elks have to try and do traveling to BC. It's not that bad. It's a 6-day week is tough, though, especially when you're banged up, and they're going to have to find an answer at Sam. They're going to have to maybe find some answers offensively in terms of scheme too. But I think the big takeaway is that you just can't get down. This is a team that has to stay on top, or at least close by, because they're just not built to come from a 2-score deficit. It's just not the way they're constructed, and that's fine. They just have to play the way Montreal does and be smart, don't make mistakes, and take advantage when those opportunities present themselves. And they just weren't able to do that tonight. Well, that will just about do things for us on this episode, this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast as the Alouettes beat the Argos 30-20. We will have our pregame walkthrough coming to you on Tuesday night this week as we get set for a Thursday night game. It's the first road game for the Toronto Argonauts as we're constantly talking about this unbalanced schedule where they start the season with 3 straight at home, and now they've got 3 straight on the road, and it doesn't get significantly easier. They've got to travel to Regina and take on the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who are undefeated as well. It's the second straight game against a 3-0 team. I don't think the Roughriders are as good as Montreal is, but that's a really tough place to play at Mosaic Stadium. And they are going in against a team that is full of confidence and going up against former Argos defensive coordinator, Coach Corey Mace, who is going to be fired up to play against his former team. So it really doesn't get easier for the Argonauts as they have to take their show on the road. Well, that will just about do it for us on this X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Together, fight the foe, foe, foe.